Hello, hello, and welcome to Pod Talk, the second episode. This is a live stream roundtable where experienced podcasters share real world strategies, creative insights, and behind the scenes secrets to help new creators master the art, craft, and business of building a standout show. I am your host today. My name is Izolda Trakhtenberg. I'll tell you a bit about myself in a minute, but first, let me introduce to you Kurt Sasso, the host of Two Geeks Talking, Reena Friedman Watts, the host of Better Call Daddy, and Barney Smith from StoryComic.com. Hello, everyone. Welcome.
Awesome.
Uh,
Hey, number
it's a,
two. That's right.
and it's so funny that you, Kurt, are saying, "Oh, it's great to be here." When this is sort of your brainchild. I'm very excited that we're doing this though, because we all get a lot of questions about how to do what we do, how to keep it going, how to keep it growing. And so I'm grateful to both you and Reena, Kurt, that you decided to start this as a way of us giving back to people who are really interested in learning more about how to podcast and all of the ins and outs of it. Who just really, there are so many people who are trying to sell them stuff, and we're not trying to sell you anything if you're listening to this. What we're trying to do is help you learn more about an art and craft and really kind of a magic show that we all love. So, for all of you who are here tonight, who are listening and watching live, thank you for being here. And to Kurt and Barney and Reena, I'm so grateful once again to be sharing the metaphoric stage with you. How is everybody? Don't all talk
Good.
at once.
I'm
I
doing
just
well.
moved.
Yeah.
So,
Oh,
like Barney was talking about getting his setup in order. Oh my God. Yes, this is my new makeshift setup. And really, as long as you have a good mic and a couple of lights and a good internet connection, you pretty much can get started. And I've had to do that on the road. I've moved 3 times in 3 years. So I've broadcasted from, the library or someone
mm,
else's studio or my closet or my bedroom. So I think that that's one thing that can kind of put people at ease, even, is that it really doesn't take much to get started.
for sure. I've broadcast from Bryant Park, right in the center of New York City, and have enjoyed the heck out of it. And what's really interesting is when you're doing something like that and you're recording, quite frankly, people stop you and go, "What are you doing?" And then they become guests on the show, like right then. So it's really fun. What about you, Barney? You just had a story about a con, and I'm sure with Story Comic, you are doing a lot of things like that. You and Kurt both actually doing a lot of cons, a lot of sci-fi, a lot of what we would call geek type stuff or nerd type stuff. And you are making you were mentioning some of the different tendrils or the tributaries of the river of Story Comic. Any one of them beating your brain right now, or are you just smooth sailing?
Oh, I guess the answer is just like it's like the old adage about the duck. The duck on the water looks like it's so smooth just going there, but you got to see underneath the water, its feet paddling like
Furiously.
voraciously, and I really believe as long as you're having fun doing what you're doing, it it doesn't matter how busy you are. And this is the other thing. It's like saying you're productive because busy sounds like a busy word, but saying the
Mm.
word productive shows that there's actually forward momentum happening. So
Hopefully, yes, progress, not perfection. I love it. I love it. Kurt, what about you? What's going on with your world?
Well, I'm actually getting ready to get into the TV and film industry once more. I have 3 projects on the go this year. So I've been just doing as many interviews as I can, just cramming it all in there and trying to get a decent release schedule. But I think it's been a great, like Barney says, progress is key, and that's the thing. Small steps towards progress is the ultimate goal. So I had some really great interviews recently, and I just had another guy back on, Brett Giuliano. You know him, Barney, and we just talked an hour about true crime, mafia stories, and podcasts, and all that other stuff of his knowledge in Chicago, and had a couple of authors on. So a lot of really wide range of people, a lot more musicians this year around too. So I'm looking forward to this chat. I'm looking forward to our questions, and I thank you for hosting this, because I can't do it every night. So I'm glad we're doing this roundtable session of hosting.
Yeah, I'm happy to do it. You all know me. I know that I love to talk. But something that and I am today's host is Izolda Trakhtenberg, the host of the Your Creative Mind podcast. Just so you know, I interview Emmy and Grammy winners, Tony winners, sometimes Academy Award winners, best-selling authors, and other people who are making creativity their livelihood. And I talk about how they do it so that you can do it too. Alrighty. So I love, Kurt, that you mentioned that you're doing all these interviews, because one of the things that we've done with the show is, with this roundtable, I should say, is to all of us just sort of come up with questions that either we've been asked or that we've been exploring ourselves about how to improve our podcast. And you said, I'm doing all these interviews. And so I'm going to just jump right on in and go, okay, Kurt, tell us this question that you submitted for all of us to sort of ponder and explore. How do you get to that point where you figure out how to ask the right questions of and for your guest? And how do you know when you've done it? How do you know when you've asked the right questions?
And I'm glad you reiterated the question, because I had to look it up myself, because I couldn't remember what I had written down. No, asking the right questions is always the most difficult part about being a person. It's not just about being a podcast host, it's about being a person. How do you know what question you need to ask the person to get the answer you are looking for? And out of doing this for like 16 years now, it just comes down to, you kind of get a read on people. It's not just the research side of things, that definitely helps matters, but I've always had issues with, am I going too far with my questions, or am I not diving into enough? Are these questions even interesting to the guest itself? And so I think a lot of trial and error has happened in regards to finding the right questions for a variety of guests. It's not just for who you're speaking to at that particular time. Because I've been doing interviews in entertainment, specifically with comics, TV, film, music, and video games, I've had to actively make a list of just general questions for every industry, so that I can kind of dive back into it if my research doesn't come up with any good questions. But there's times when those questions don't actively allow you to dive deep enough. So you have to go off the cuff. You have to actively think, is something they've said in this interview, will that generate a new question? And will that bring you to a new level of understanding of that guest, or bring you on a completely different train track you didn't realize you're going to go to in your interview? So it's a little trial and error, but research helps, at least in my opinion. And is the guest passionate about themselves and wants to answer questions? Sometimes you have to, unfortunately, pull teeth with some guests, but metaphorically speaking. But I mean, that aside, you do your best with what you have to work with.
For sure. And what you just said, just the thing that leapt into my mind was listening skills. And I've been on your show as a guest, and you have amazing listening skills. That's one of the, if you're a podcaster and or a new podcaster and you want to get better, sharpen those listening skills, because being in the moment with your guests, being fully present and really listening to ask good questions is one of the key things that you can do, in my opinion, to improve how you interview people. But I'm going to turn it over to the other two guests today. Reena, why don't you tell us what you think as far as how you come up with your very amazing and in-depth questions? Because I've been a guest on your show too, and wow, did we go deep.
It's funny because I was getting ready to compliment both you and Kurt. I actually listened back to those interviews because I feel like when you do a good job being a guest on someone's show, you can listen to what you liked from other interviews when you're preparing for another interview. So I frequently do that. As far as asking the right questions, some of my ninja techniques are stalking people's social media prior to interviewing them, seeing what they're most recently talking about. Also, I like to, since I'm the host of the Better Call Daddy show, tie it back into the theme of my show. So a lot of times I'll either ask, what was your relationship like with your dad? Tell me a daddy story. Is there any wisdom that you've gleaned from your own father? And if you don't have a relationship with your dad, is there anything like you wish you could have asked a father? Those types of things. So even for your show, Kurt, like you said, you've generated questions back to specific industries that you interview. I think that that's a good idea. Maybe even highlight, hey, this person I know from the comic book world. And, what do you have in common with that person? Sometimes, like when I've interviewed celebrities, like when I worked on the Judge Alex show or when I worked on the Jerry Springer show or some of these reality TV hosts that I've had on, I try to notice something about them that we either have in common. Like when I interviewed the host of the Jewish matchmaking, I noticed that she always wore a necklace. So I was like, hey, what's the meaning behind that necklace? I noticed you always wear that piece. Or, hey, I noticed that you're wearing Micah fashion. I have a Micah fashion dress too. Or when I interviewed Jerry Springer, I was like, hey, remember that trip to Jamaica? I went on that with you, right? So I try to bring up things that we have in common that the audience might find interesting that we share those things. I think that that can be interesting. And it changes the conversation that they might have with someone else.
For sure. And what's interesting to me in that is that it then feels like a conversation and not just an interview, right? And that's one of the things you excel at, Reena, is it felt like we were sitting around over a cup of coffee chatting, and that just immediately put me at ease so that we could go into that really deep place. And I appreciate that so much about you and how you host. So yay for you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I also love that I got you to sing. I only have gotten a couple of people to do that. And, I have like an IG Live coming up with someone who also sings as part of his brand. He goes by Phil Davis, Fulfillment Solutions. And I've been practicing his jingle just to see
That's
if maybe
awesome.
we could like duet it or something. Yeah.
That's
So
awesome. I love it.
I have singing in common with you. I was like, would you feel comfortable doing that? Or if I have a musician I'm like, beforehand, I might say, hey, keep your ukulele present. Like, I would love you to freestyle that. Right. So knowing those things about people can be fun. I love knowing that somebody's a singer, songwriter, musician, former reality TV junkie, any of those things.
A reality TV junkie, guilty. Yeah, and and thank you for bringing up that whole singing thing. I'm developing my new jingle for the show, and it's going to be my vocals. So I'm very excited. Me in 4-part harmony with myself. It's going to be super fun. I hope either that or people are going to be like, "What is that?" But maybe they won't. Maybe they'll like it. What about you, Barney? What are your thoughts on what it takes to come up with the right questions of the people that you're interviewing?
Well, much like what Reena and Kurt said as well, and also what you said, is that I love doing the research, and then especially when I have a guest who I'm not quite familiar with at first when they reach out, I just study them a lot. And as you study them, you create a genuine curiosity about the person. And one of the things that I always try to end up doing is making sure that they end up telling a good story. Everybody has a good story in them. And I love also not asking redundant questions that they might have been asked before. And when you hit gold when they pause and they say, "That's a really good question." And
Yes.
one of them, like as some examples, is I kind of focus a lot also on like Vermont artists and authors. And I had Catherine Patterson, who wrote The Bridge to Terabithia, was on my show. And I asked her beforehand, I said, "I've seen a lot of your interviews. People keep asking about The Bridge of Terabithia. Do you want to talk about some of your other books?" She's like, "I'd love to talk about my other books." And so we focused on that. Paul Zaloom, who any Gen X knows as Beekman from Beekman's World, he is a Vermont artist. And we glossed over the fact that he was right next to Bill Nye the Science Guy. Those two people battled each other for eyes for 15 years. And I said, "Listen, I did a lot of research. You want to talk about your puppetry?" He's like, "I'd love to talk about my puppets." So just focusing on talking about just getting more into the depth of, your interviews, and getting to make sure that everybody else sees the interview you've done turn into an evergreen interview that can be watched during any time or any year. And that's why I seem to be streaming more off, focusing on people who really want to, push that one show they're on, or that one thing that they're on right now, because then I've noticed that those interviews seem to have a much shorter lifespan, but focusing more on the person that you're talking to and not necessarily that one thing that they're plugging. So,
Yeah. And, it's interesting to me because what you mentioned about curiosity just runs through everything you just said, is about being curious about the person you're going to interview. And for my part, first of all, just the note, just you said Bridge to Terabithia, and I'm like, no, I don't want to start crying. So, yeah, so I'm glad you didn't spend too much time talking about that book, because it just, yeah, tears out your heart and eats it. But what's interesting to me about those kinds of questions, the ones that lead to stories, is that they're usually, and this is what I do, I focus on what and how questions rather than on where or when or why. Why is kind of defensive. You're asking someone to justify something. Where and when, you can Google the where and when somebody did something or whatever, but the what and the how tends to elicit those stories. So I love that facet of it as far as how we tell stories in the interview process, because it does. An interview is going to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. But as I said earlier, if you know me at all, you know, you know that I talk a lot. And in fact, my record for the longest podcast episode is with T. Morris, who, if you know steampunk, you know T, uber geek, and that's 3.5 hours long. So I don't know if that's any kind of record. It might be, but my point is that I do not edit. And that is why I have episodes sometimes as long as 3.5 hours. But Reena, you decided to focus your sort of exploration for tonight on that notion, whether or not we should edit, and are we changing the story or message of our interview when we do edit? I'd love it if you'd address that and explore that a little bit before we explore it, the rest of us.
That was such a great artful transition and how you led into that. I love that. That was so good. That comes from your professionalism. I just want to say that. So, in the beginning, when I first started podcasting, I was really over editing to the point where I was re-recording bits. Now, when I create the intros to my show now, I base them upon my dad's reaction to the guests that I interviewed. So my show is a little bit different. I interview guests, then I share the story with my dad. It's kind of like a choose your own adventure, I swear to God, because like he listens to it separately. We don't talk about the guest until we record his reaction to it. And then from his reaction, I formulate the intro. That's pretty much the majority of how I do it now. But sometimes, somebody will interview me and they'll do a really good job. And then I will take that interview, I'll have my dad listen to it, and I'll create a custom intro and re-air somebody interviewing me and then a dad reaction. And I've done some different variations, but I've had a lot of guests, I would say a handful, maybe 10 or more, tell me that they've overshared and that they want me to cut sections out. So not only was I dealing with the over editing, taking out every and ah, and it sounded almost like choppy and robotic in the beginning, and I've loosened a lot up on that, but then I'm having guests say, ooh, can you take out that part I talked about my brother? Or, oh, can you take out that part I talked about my mother? And I'm like, that was the best part of your story. So, if it's one line where they said something that's going to really hurt a family member, fine. That's an easy fix. But if it's, 5 minutes to 15 minutes out of your 40-minute interview, that's really not, I feel like, going to sound as genuine or as authentic. And for me, I have said to people, I really enjoyed that conversation and I'm happy to not air it. If it's going to bother you that much, I think that maybe we should just not air it. Also, I had a situation where I had an author on, and I really prepared for it. Like I, read the book and listened to many interviews, and I had been on her show, and I really wanted to know the person behind the book. But she
Mm.
really like shared some things with me she wasn't comfortable sharing professionally, and things that were happening in her personal life, and she walked off like during the interview
Wow.
and came back and was like, I can't share. I just can't. And I was like, okay, fair. I'll never air it. And thank you for trusting me with this. And then she was like, can we re-record it? And I was just like, that will totally take away from, I feel like, kind of what I was looking to do here. And so I didn't.
Hmm. I mean, it's your show, right? That's the thing. That's the beauty of being podcasters in this way, is we are the final word. We are the world builders, and I think that it makes so much sense. And what you said about people oversharing, that's really tough because you create this beautifully safe space for people to overshare, but they kind of know that they're saying stuff, right? You have to hold yourself accountable, I think, to the fact that you are in front of a microphone and you are recording an interview. And one of the things that I do is I tell people that I don't edit right up front. Everybody knows I do not edit. But if they've signed an NDA and legally they're saying something that they shouldn't say or whatever, I say, tell me immediately so I can mark it, because otherwise I won't edit it out. And so we have this responsibility with the sacred trust of information, and that's a challenge to keep meeting as we do it. So I'd love to go to Barney this time. Barney, what is your thought on that challenge of editing or not with the information that and the story that people are telling us?
So, my day job is, and I think I told you guys last time, I own a radio station, and now as of recently, I just bought a newspaper. So I see this as the point of, in both mediums, the job is to educate, entertain, and inform. And I learned something from that day job, is that my job is to make sure that I sound good and they sound good.
Mm.
And I say a lot of ums. I guarantee if you look at this podcast afterwards, it's like, he said a lot of ums. And so I usually edit to make because I have to make myself look good, because then no one's ever going to be on my podcast. um and also I just don't know. And the and I and also I believe too is that the what we do is what we create. That interview is belongs to us, especially if we're doing something for free. This is the product that we've created with them, and that it gives us the ability to not edit it to the point to make them say something they didn't say. But there's been a lot of times where my job is to make them look good as well.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of times where I've seen somebody pause a bit or just say something completely random, like, just so you know, I cut that out. And like, thank you. I didn't even think. I was like, yeah, you said something that was really weird. And then and some of it, it's like it's there to make, it's there to actually engage in the audience. And plus, when I edit it, I can then market it to my Patreons, to my patron members, to say, you get to see the unedited version, and there's only a few of you that get to see this. And so I see
That's
that
cool.
also as a marketing piece as well. So yeah.
That's really neat. And what's interesting to me about what you're saying is that in that process, for example, you have a newspaper, you have a radio station. I don't know, as far as the news, is it investigative journalism? Because I don't consider myself an investigative journalist. I'm not, and I tell my guests this, I'm not out to trap you into saying something or revealing something that you don't want to reveal. That's not what's going on here. And so as I work through and keep developing and growing this podcast, this show, this baby, that's now actually a teenager. That's how old the podcast is. But we do have a responsibility. It is our show, but we do have a responsibility not to leave a bad taste in people's mouths. So I agree with you completely that it's this delicate balancing act. And
Right.
I appreciate that very much that you said that.
And just to make a little quick point on there is like, and this is something that I learned also since I bought a newspaper. There's a local newspaper there who is always upset about the paper I bought that calls itself a newspaper. There's
Mm.
three versions of papers. There's what's called a shopper, where it's just all coupons. Then you have what's called a features paper, which is like, here's some feature stories. They're not, there's no editor, there's no, yeah, there's no reporters involved where they actually do research. And then you have what's called a newspaper where you actually do have reporters that hit it. I see what I create now is not, like podcasts. I don't create news, I create features. I create
Mm.
the conversation that people will be like, that's a really cool piece. And I want to learn more about this artist or musician or actor. And and that's why I think it's important for me, when I edit it for the fact that like, this is not an unedited, instigative, like investigative reporter piece, or this isn't news. This is a conversation. And my job is to make sure that the show looks good and then my guest looks good. That's how I see it. So, yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. It really does. And speaking of looking good, Kurt, what about you? What is your thought on this? Because you are a master. Like, I remember no, seriously, I remember what I said versus what aired, if you will. And they're two different things in some ways. And you didn't lose the soul of what I said at all, but you did make it tighter. You made it more compelling and frankly more fun. I'm like, oh, I didn't realize I was so funny. That's awesome. So talk a little bit, if you would, about your process in creating the show that you create with respect to tightening it up.
Well, I've been on both sides. So in the first 10 years of the show, I was exactly like Reena, where I was just, whatever we did. It was live. It was unedited, raw, to the point of, I don't know if I can release my earlier episodes. It's been that long type situation. But as soon as I started bringing back the podcasts after 2016 or whatever, actually a couple of years ago, I started thinking, okay, well, the people I have on the show, they're saying what they want to say. They have a great space to do that. That's all wonderful. But times their trains of thought just go out the window. And it's very hard to listen to. And if you're doing a half hour, 45-minute, an hour long show, I was looking at my analytics. Based on my analytics, I'm like, no one's going to listen to 34 minutes or 40 minutes of just rambling. So let's tighten it up. Let's take an active approach to keeping the same message, but making it flow a lot cleaner. And so while I do video interviews, I'm editing for audio. I'm editing as if I'm going to release this as a podcast. So yes, my video is going to jump all over the place, and I can't help that. But the message is clear. As McClellan said, the medium is the message. I want your message to be what you want to talk about. And so at most, when I'm editing down shows, yes, I will take out the ums and the ahs and the and buts and all of those filler words if it's clean. So if it's a clean and but, it's gone. If it's a clean it's gone. If they're doing and they get into their message, I'm not going to really touch that. And so it just comes back to your editorial preference. I'm not clearing out 5 minutes of content just because something was said that I don't agree with or anything like that, as long as it's not disparaging, etc. But I want to make sure that message is clear from the very first time they press play to the end of the episode when they can finally support the guests. So I see the value in the raw form of unedited shows. I see the value in edited shows. And I think that it comes down to time and personal preference in terms of your professional approach as a podcast editor and host.
That makes all the sense in the world to me, even though that's not what I do. Yeah, it's interesting. I tell my guests in the middle, before we start, I have embraced the pause. In other words, there are times when there's some dead air on my show because I'm taking in, listening, and sort of processing what they've just said. And I've had people go, are you still there? Yep, I'm still here. But at the same time, I feel like it gives the audience, and I've had comments, people have actually commented that it's actually a time for them to breathe and think about what's just been said too. So I'm loath to stop doing that. But I know that best practices say that we shouldn't have dead air. I used to be a DJ on the radio, and dead air was the worst thing that could possibly happen. Whereas now, again, it's my show, and I feel like having some dead air so that you can go make yourself a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I say go for it. Let's do that. So, and that can put people off, and it can make people more excited to listen. It all depends, I think, on what you're going for. And I know, Kurt, for example, you're a very experienced podcaster. You've been doing this for a long time, and you too, Reena, and Barney, you as well. And some of it is, like you said, Kurt, what are you doing it for? What is the goal as a podcaster? And that brings me to Barney's question, because this is a passion project for many of us. And yet at the same time, it is also a business. And so the question that Barney was thinking to explore, and I'm gonna ask you to explore first, Barney, and then we'll go roundtable on it, is how to take your podcast from that passion project to something that's more of a sustainable career. So I'd love to get your thoughts on that, Barney.
So, and this is one of the things that you've been doing this for so long, is that I do it because it's been a passion, and I've made so many friends, and I've met so many amazing people for it. And I've come to the conclusion as well, is that I've been doing it I'm on my 6th year doing this, which is baby steps compared to you guys. I mean, it's and I've made it past the point where I'm gonna just keep doing it. And there's that 100 podcast mark. If you make it past 100 episodes, then we got you. You're never leaving. And I look at that when I look at my mentors in the newspaper and radio business, who says you don't start a new show until you get sponsors, because once it's going, nobody's going to sponsor it because it's already on. So that's where I feel as though it is that I can ask, hey, do you want to be a sponsor? And so I guess like the piece of it is that the way I've been taught how to find sponsors has always been do it before you start. But then it's the opposite of where I see a lot of podcasts are like, well, we're going to see if you start doing stuff first, and then we'll come in and reach out. And then and how do you market it? And what am I trying to say here is, who am I doing this for? Am I doing it for me? Then that's fine. Am I doing it for my guests? Then you know what? You guys have to help promote that episode. It's not on me. I just gave you free social media marketing tools, and you better share the biscuits out of it. And or am I doing it for the audience? And if you have to pick who you're doing it for. And that's what it comes down to. You see a lot of the successful podcasts that are out there do it for the audience. And the audience decides the direction of your show. And as the audience decides the direction of your show, that's where it also determines who you're going to have on as the next guest. If you're doing it for yourself and you're just like, I'm having a great time doing this, then you just hope that you reach the audience that are just like you. If you're doing it for your guests, then that's where you should start charging your guests to say, all right, and like what Kurt does, like you're going to get charged $50, $100, and I'm doing this, and I'm going to give you a really good product because I've been doing it for so long, but I'm not doing it for free. So there are ways to make money on it, and I'm still at that point where I'm just doing it for having such a fun time doing it that I don't know how to make money off of my passion. I know how to make money to pay my bills with my job, but I don't know how to market to do it for my passion. Because in a way, I also feel like, do I dilute my passion? And all of a sudden, do I lose my passion for it because now I have to do it because I'm making money on it? It's one of those things where, like, how many times you see people have a hobby and they do it and they love it, but I've never met a person who is like emphatic about Legos but opens up a Lego store. No, because they're selling their stuff. No, these are mine. So that's where I'm kind of at that point is, and I'm really curious about, that I'm really curious also about everybody else's feedback. And I got to appreciate Reena for muting herself because she laughs a lot. And I don't know if that's, and she's really being really smart. And I got to learn to do that too. So,
I used to mute myself too because I have a lot to say and I don't want to interrupt the guest. I've gotten to the point where I don't have to mute myself anymore, but yes, I do laugh loud.
I encourage loud laughter, actually. That's great. Yeah. And, it's interesting what you're saying about how do you make your passion into essentially your product? And that notion of don't ever make your avocation into your vocation, I feel is a weird sort of Henry Ford-esque patina on things, because I think we ought to have the opportunity to make what we love be a moneymaker. Just because you love it, because artists get this all the time, I think. You have your day job and people say, don't quit your day job. And then you do what you love after hours. So you don't actually get to have a life because you work your 9 to 5 or 9 to 6 or 9 to 8. And then you come home and then you do the passion project. And I bring this up all the time. My husband and I went to Cuba, and in Cuba, artists are like plumbers or like architects or like maids or like whoever. It's a job, and you can go on the artist track, and that can be your job. And podcasting, although communication is a little bit weird in Cuba, but that's another track that you could go. Education is another track that you could go, and you sign up for that, and that is the track that you are on, and you will make money at that thing. Here, we have a very different supposed meritocracy, but I'm not sure it is one. I keep banging my head against that wall because that notion of don't quit your day job makes me break out in hives. So that's just me. So Kurt, I would love to get your thoughts on this because I know you are a master at this. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are about how to turn this passion into a viable product.
I don't think I'm a master at anything, to be perfectly honest. But when it comes to this is only something I've started charging for in the past 3 years. So there's that whole adage of guests feel that podcasters are should do this for free. Guests do not feel like they need to pay for promotion. They think that it's a symbiotic relationship where they just appear, they give you the content, and you should be happy to have a guest. And to a certain extent, that's fine. But we have to live. So how do we as podcasters make money? And if we're not actively charging guests to be on our show, if you're going that free route, how do you make money for it? And I banged my head against that proverbial wall for almost 14 years because I kept giving it away for free. And the more I gave it away for free, the more I just kept getting walked over. And at some point, you have to draw a line in that sand where you say, here's what I can offer you based on my years of experience. I can provide you with social media. I can provide you with a great interview. I can provide you with an interactive interview if you're willing to pay that amount. And I can provide short form content from our interview. So it's like the Gary Vee method of taking long form content, breaking it down into short form content, and then releasing it to your social media platforms. That's really the basis of what I do. But I'm providing you with not just podcasting experience, I'm providing you with graphic design experience. I'm providing you with social media management. I'm providing you with short form content that is customly created, where it's including B-roll and everything like that short form content is. If the guest is able to do that, then they would have already done it. So let us provide that functionality for the guest. We are solving your problem of you're coming on the show to be a guest, you're promoting yourself and or your product. Then let us be the solution to solve said ability to promote yourself with this type of content. Has it worked out well for me? Some cases, yes. I've had some very wonderful repeat clients that like what I do. They like the style of it. I don't tighten up my editing process on them. I let them breathe, as one guest wanted me to see. He goes, okay, I love what you did with my first interview, but let me breathe. For the love of God, let me breathe. Because I was editing it too tight. Anyhow, if a guest tells me that, that's fine. That goes back to the editing side of things. Long story short, if you provide a service for your show, your podcast, and you're able to get a guest to say, hey, look, this is how I'm solving your solution to your promotional problem, let me do that. And here's the amount that it's going to cost. Here's an introductory rate. Here's a higher tier rate that gives you more benefit if you liked what I did initially. Whether they go for that or not, who knows? But it's worked out so far, and I've made some amount of money on that. And then it's about cold outreach. Then it's about going back to past guests. What's your mailing list like? How are you actively reaching out to these people that you haven't talked to in 2, 3, 5, 10 years? Maybe they're interested, maybe they're not. At least you're approaching them not from a business sense of, here, this is what I'm selling, but it's kind of that symbiotic relationship now, more benefiting you as well as them. So I don't know if that answered the question, but that's what I got.
I think that's a great answer, actually. And I love that notion of what they call the long tail of the content, right? So you're not just going, here's the raw video, here's the raw audio. You can create audiograms, you can create pull quotes, you can create Instagram posts and TikToks and Blue Sky posts and da da da. There's all this stuff that you can do with this that we don't often talk about. And so I appreciate very much that you have embraced that and have made that sort of an arm of your business. I think that that's a really wise and savvy way of doing it. And I appreciate that. And it's interesting to me in comparing you, Kurt, and you, Reena, the way you do your shows in many ways is similar, and in some key ways it's different. And I appreciate both ways. One of the things that I appreciate about yours, Reena, is that it feels like we're having coffee, but there's also a guardian angel, right? You've got your dad as your guardian angel as an added bonus for your guest. And just that, again, increases the comfort level, but also increases the perspective that the guest gets when they're on the show. So when they have that, and you have your pedigree of being, producer on the Jerry Springer Show and all of this, when you have that, when guests come on your show, what role does that facet of your dad being part of the show and your pedigree being part of the show play in creating a sustainable, profitable, dare I say it, show?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. Just like Kurt, I have had people pay me to rent a studio and produce branded segments for them. I also have taken on coaching clients that, just want to work with me for a couple sessions and they want me to break down how to do it. And then there are some people that have paid me to break down how to do it and then want me to do it for them. So I have made money in lots of different ways. I've also had, people want me to research shows for them or help them get sponsorships for their shows. It's interesting that Barney said that he feels like you need a sponsor to launch. I thought that would be a good idea. And I did actually reach out to brands that I had worked with in the past. And prior to launching my show, I did have one small sponsor. Manscaped threw me like $500 for my first 10 episodes. And I said to them, look, like, I'm going to be interviewing controversial people. I know you're a controversial brand. I'm happy to read a script that you give me. So it was a bit of a, once I blow this thing up, my price is going to go up type of thing. And do you want to be my exclusive partner? And I knew somebody that worked at the brand because I had booked him a speaking gig in the past. And I think that launching with a sponsor then led to other better sponsors. I didn't actually keep up my deal with Manscaped because I didn't feel like their message really paired well with all of my guests. I'll just say that. And I don't know if the message that they had me read really felt like something that I wanted to say. So that's something that you have to be careful of. I think that there was probably more flexibility around the script than I maybe even realized, but it just didn't really seem like the direction I wanted to go. So for me, I want to work with sponsors that I actually like love and use the product. So right now I only have one sponsor that I'm doing that with, and it's this herb, it's ashwagandha and tulsi, and I actually love it. And I reached out to her because I saw that she was sponsoring events of friends of mine, and I liked her brand and I liked her message and I liked her product. And then I said, "Hey, I'd like to interview you, and would you be interested in possibly partnering with me?" And we worked something out. So I think that it can work that way. I've also I've reached out to snack brands that my kids actually love the snacks that are like kosher and gluten-free and, have aspects to their brand that I love. And I said, "Hey, I'd be willing to advertise with you if you send me boxes of your snacks." So it can be like in-kind sponsorships as well. That's just an idea. I've also reached out to a fashion brand that I saw, the host of a show wearing that I loved, and she sent me a couple of her dresses and I loved them and then wanted to partner with her in some kind of way. So I think that sponsorships can look different. Sometimes they can be money, sometimes they can be product, sometimes they can be doing an event together. It can be lots of different things.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Kurt.
So sorry, I just want to mention, like I've done read-throughs for sponsors as well. Clue FM was one of them initially for, I don't know, that must have been felt like 6 months, but it was probably only 3. Where once you get a message on video or on audio on podcasts, unless you decide to re-release that particular episode, that's there forever. Mm-hmm. So you kind of also have to understand, is this, like you said, is this the message that I want to continue on my show? Or is there something else I can do? Or you actively go after sponsors? And another one I think I did was like some poker online site like years ago, where the site no longer works now, but I haven't gone back and edited that episode to take it out. So I guess, can we find sponsors for our message or for our show that still embodies the theme of what we're trying to create? I think would be an interesting way to search for companies in that respect.
Right. And I know, just in the radio and newspaper world, is that it takes 10 outreaches for one, on average. So it doesn't matter the size of your podcast, how new it is, or that if you find people that match your mission and values of your podcast, find those folks and just start reaching out to them, and know that when it comes to selling something, nobody calls you back. So you have to keep reaching out to them until
That's so
they say
funny.
no.
I love it. Yeah. And it's interesting, this whole notion. And I love does it fit with the message and the theme of your show? That idea is wonderful. And I too only have sponsors where the products are things or services or things that I can really get behind, usually that I use. And I'm vegan. So when I get leather companies wanting to sponsor my show, no, right. And that I have a very easy on my guest interest form that I have that people fill out if they want to pitch themselves, or PR companies want to pitch a guest on the show. I let them know, if you use animal products, if you advocate for using animals or animal products in any way, just don't bother, because I'm not going to let you on the show. And I say it a little nicer than that, but that's pretty much how it is. So that's very important to me as a podcaster, as a person. That's where my line is. On the other hand, people who are vegan companies, come at me. Yes, absolutely. I would love to have you sponsor my show, but also affiliate marketing. There are so many ways that things that you already use and love can be sort of inadvertent sponsors of your show. So if you're starting a show and you've got a product that you absolutely love, or if you've got a really local show or a more local show like Barney does, for example, let's say is Vermont the maple syrup state? I hope I'm not wrong. Well, so let's say there's a maple syrup that Barney just absolutely loves. That would be a perfect sponsor or a perfect affiliate marketing situation for a podcast that focuses so much locally. So if you're running a show or starting a show that's going to have a very local focus, reach out to local businesses and see if they want to sponsor or do an affiliate understanding with you. that's something that I think that we all as podcasters need to do. And the other part of it is, frankly, I just have to say this. Often, even the most seasoned podcaster will market other people better than they will market themselves. We have, and this I think goes to so much in life, that it's harder to talk what you do up rather than go, see that, you see that, Reena? She's amazing. She's got this podcast where her dad is on it. It's incredible. Saying that about my podcast is amazing. You're totally going to love it. You should totally. It's harder. So you have to do a little self-talk, a little sort of psychological mind bending and healing to get to yourself to a place where it's okay and even a good thing to talk about your show in a way that will be enticing and inviting and encouraging for people to do that. And once you do, if they like your voice, if they like who you are and you like them, host read ads are amazing. That's another really great way to do a beautiful segment where and I don't mean, let me just talk to you about the fact that I love these vegan shoes. I'm going to talk to you about the story where I wore these vegan shoes in the rain and they kept my feet perfectly dry. And oh my God, walking around New York City, it made it so much easier to have these shoes on my feet, if that's what happened, right? So I'm only going to talk about the truth. But the point is that there are ways, as Barney said to begin with, where we as podcasters can tell the stories of the products that we really love that then sponsor the episodes in a really organic, enticing, wonderful way that really makes it a relationship and a partnership rather than this person wants me to put an ad up. I don't like doing that, and I almost never do personally. Other podcasters might decide that it works for them, and you do you, right? You have to figure it out for yourself. But this brings me to my question that I wanted to explore here. And the reason I went last is because I figured all of this dovetails really nicely into this facet of monetizing your show. Here's the deal. Most podcasters get a lot of pitches from communication and PR companies. PR people see that your show is good. They see that it's got reviews. They see that you're actually timely as far as how often you come out with episodes, and they go, oh, that Your Creative Mind podcast would be perfect for my best-selling author. Let me pitch my author to Izolda. And you get this email, and they include their media kit, and they just bombard you with information, to which I have a little template that says, hi, thanks so much for your interest in the Your Creative Mind podcast. Please go here and fill out my form. Why? Because I get 30 to 40 pitches a day. I don't need all those pitches. I can't go through all those pitches. My interns can't go through all those pitches. So no. But on the other hand, some of this I think is education. We as podcasters have the opportunity to make the PR companies, the PR pros, our partners in podcasting, because I think the paradigm, and I forget which one of us said this earlier, that the paradigm seems to be that we are here to do this for free, and that the guests are like, yes, I'm here and I don't owe you jack. I don't think that I agree with that. So this is an opportunity for us all to be partners together, the guest, the PR pro, and most especially the host. And so I would love to get your thoughts on that. How do we make PR pros, communication pros who are being paid by potential guests to get them earned media, which is get them on podcasts, get them some kind of press. They're getting paid to do this, so they pitch widely. And if they get them on a podcast, they're actually fulfilling their contract. So how do we change that paradigm if it's possible? Because right now it's a little one-sided. And I would love to hear from all of you when you get cold pitches, and then you do the legwork, and then you vet and you research, you interview, you edit, you publish, you promote. The PR clients get airtime, the PR pros get money, and then the podcasters going, I just did all this work for free. It's labor intensive and it's value rich. So how do we get our product to be thought of by the PR pros as a partnership that gets acknowledgement, support, and compensation? Kurt, I'd love to start with you on this. What are your thoughts?
Well, I have two stories to that. One, and they're fairly recent. Actually, they were all this year. One I had a couple of days ago, and it was a great experience where it was. Um, I get entertainment pitches constantly, like you. It's just half the time I don't even read them because I just don't have time. This one in particular was like, oh, I have this female associate conductor that's doing the Naruto Symphonic Experience, and she's traveling. There's two conductors, and this one is doing interviews. Do you want to have her on the show? I'm like, okay, well, I'm a fan of Naruto, and I'm a fan of amazing conductors. So sure, let's have her on the show. 15 emails later, we're going back and forth so much, which is another thing that I can't stand, but that's another question for another pod talk, is it went from a half hour down to a 15-minute segment because this PR person decided to triple book or whatever the heck that person was doing. But the conversation went well. It was tight. It was to the point. I got it quickly edited and released. Now, will I go back to that PR person that introduced me to that PR person? Because it was a PR person chain. Just, I don't even want to figure that one out. And it got to the point where I know the person, the main PR person that sent me on this chain was promoting. But I know he's given me other interviews in the past where I know it's a mutual respect. That's where I don't mind it being free. The another one was a PR person contacted me on another generic podcast website where you match guests to shows. Well, that guest didn't show up. And that PR person never actually contacted me back after not only phone calling him directly from my phone to his, didn't bother calling me back, didn't bother giving me a response email saying why the guest didn't bother showing up, completely ghosted me. When I put all this legwork into it, that person will never be on my show again. So how can we actively approach or work with PR people? Whether or not we receive financial gain or not, I don't know how we can actively do that unless there's some low ball number for that to even happen. I doubt that will even occur in our lifetimes, but it is what it is. I just think it comes down to mutual respect. If you have a guest, if you know this PR person is in your wheelhouse in sharing guests that are part of your morals and your values of your show, then try to figure out a conversation with said person to maybe be more of a benefit towards you. I don't know how you can actively do that other than going back to communication and building up a rapport with them over the years and kind of building up that level of trust between each of you. And I think it's a pity Jeff wasn't here. He'd be able to talk about this because he does all the PR stuff for a bunch of clients as well too. So we do what we can, but will we receive financial gain from it? I don't know unless you can actively get to the guests themselves directly and maybe look for a sponsorship as per our previous question and things like that.
Yeah, I believe me, I I get that it's an uphill battle, and I do understand that I feel a little bit like Sisyphus rolling that boulder up the hill, because it is a challenge, and this notion of building relationships is one of the things. What I want to caution any newer podcaster who starts getting pitches from PR pros, start early and start often reminding all of the PR pros that this is a business. That yes, it's a passion project, and yes, it is a business. This is something that is mutually beneficial, or at least it should be. And so as we do this, as we work to change the paradigm, because I'm actively trying to do that, that notion, Kurt, like you said, of building a relationship with the podcasters who know you and who know what you want out of a guest, very important. I would love to take it to Barney now. What are your thoughts on this? Are there ways, and if so, what are they, to make PR pros our partners in this, mutually beneficial partners, rather than people who pitch us guests and then maybe or maybe not share the episode when it comes out?
It's weird. I don't know what happened, but all of a sudden I got on these I get all these PR people from like new age books, and I have fun with them. I mean, not fun as in like a derogatory way, but like you know what? There is that what I said earlier, just genuine curiosity, and I am enjoying the conversations. And it gets down to the point too, is like as you're saying, is like, what do you what do you legitimately expect to get from this 1 hour relationship? Like, it's just like, do you, and the other thing too is that I make no illusions that maybe like the guest wanted specifically asked to be on my podcast. And if that's the case, then you have some leverage to probably get something out of that. But it behooves us that if I have a really good, if every interaction I have, I look at it from the point of view as like I just learned something and I've made a connection with a person. And what I do with that is I gain better strength and value and I become a better interviewer from that interaction. So in a way, it might not be a monetary gain, but I gain something about what I learned about human nature, what I've gained about what I've learned from my own skill set, the fact that I've been able to have a conversation with people that I have nothing in common with, but I found a genuine connection. And then what I've done after that is I have a conversation 5 minutes, 10 minutes before or after to try to get a good vibe from the person. And I have now, because of that, there's been a few people where I had nothing in common with that I interact with on a regular basis because of that interaction. So that's what I look at. And there's been a few things that I've gotten reached out to with for people. I'm like, I don't, there's nothing about this person that I can't even and like I can talk to 99% of the people, but this person is like, I don't know. This person seems a little preachy, and I don't think I'm going to be able to even ask a question. And I've been in those, and I think you've all been on those podcasts. You like ask one question, and it goes on for 50 minutes, and I'm just sitting there. And I don't know if you guys do this, but there's been times where like I'm just gonna check my email. I'm just gonna let this person go, and I'm just like click, 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 and I'm just like I'm checking my Facebook page and like, and then what I'll do is like I'll hear a pause and I'll say, and what happened after that? I'm like I'm just gonna let this person go. Like I'm just like I am just this is a beautiful train wreck, and I'm just gonna go with it, and I just let it happen, and I learned something from that.
Oh, that is lovely. I really love that. Checking your email. What's interesting to me, one of the non-monetary things that a little piece of sort of from me to you, if you're listening to this or watching this, is I ask for quotes. If you have a relationship with a PR pro and it goes really well, you ask for quotes. Get them to give you a quote on how fabulous you are, and it never hurts. And if they can leave a review on Apple Podcasts, great. But if not, goes on your website. Hey, this PR pro thought I was an amazing person to work with, an amazing partner to work with, and I put them up, and I'll put them up on my social media to let other people know that, hey, my show is for real. And that is something that is a non-monetary gain that, like you said, Barney, that I think is very interesting and it's enticing. It might be enticing more PR pros to come to me and try and pitch me guests for free, but it also is something that builds that relationship. And that I think is really important. Reena, what are your thoughts on this? Because for me, you come from a very professional background doing all of this production work, but you've also done the PR work as you help other people do their own podcasts and work with people. When you're playing that dual role, how do you manage that? And what are the thoughts of someone who's done the PR portion of this with respect to how to relate to and work and partner with podcasters?
Great question. Yeah, I would say kind of what you were getting at, like asking for a quote. Also ask what's the size of their email list and are they going to co-share, co-promote the episode? I would see what you can get out of the partnership and phrase it like that. And also, like you, I a lot of times I don't even respond, but maybe just keep the conversation like going. I have gotten a little sarcastic with some of them where I'm like, "Oh yeah, you think they'd be great? What's their daddy story?" I literally will just say that. I'll be like, "What's their daddy story?" And some of them respond with actually really interesting stories where I'll keep the conversation going or consider it. One of my most recent acceptances to one of these PR people was Hunter Biden's ex. wrote a book, wrote a memoir, and yeah, their publicist reached out to me. I personally thought it was a mistake. I was like, are you trying to get her on Call Her Daddy? I just want to just clarify, like, you meant to get her on my show. And they were like, no, she has a daddy story. And I was like, oh, wow, that's cool. I never would have even considered having her. So I was like, hey, send me her book, because anybody that I have on, I actually like to read their book. So that is like already getting them to take action. So I feel like if you can get them to take action on sending you a book, or if you can get them to take action by telling, their daddy story, or telling you how many people are on their email list, or get a quote or a reference, like, hey, would you be up for like writing me a LinkedIn recommendation after? Would you be up for, sharing the episode through your email list? Can I get you to agree to that? That's some of my advice. And another thing I was thinking about during this conversation is I actually know podcasters that have gotten publicists to pay. I do know podcasters that have gotten a small fee, and it was kind of like in the range of what you're saying, like, hey, cover the editing costs. Why can't you ask for that? Throw me $50, cover the editing cost. Are you up for that? And truthfully, I've had people that have been on my show 2 times. They didn't really share it. They came out with another book. They have another event they're putting on. They're doing something that they want promoted. And I'll say to them, hey, like, I will make you an episode worth sharing. And I love, that you're thinking of me and doing this collaboration. But would you be up for covering the editing costs? Or how are you going to further promote this, since you didn't really the last time?
Yeah. And it's interesting because that's part of my podcast guest interest form. They have to say that, yes, they will share it on their socials. I love the notion, though, of what's the size of your mailing list? What's the size of your followers on TikTok and Instagram and Blue Sky? I'm a huge Blue Sky fanatic, because to me, that immediately sets up this professional arrangement instead of, oh, yeah, I'll just do this for you. No, this is something that needs to be, and my favorite word right now is reciprocity. It needs to be a reciprocal arrangement. We come to this with a certain set of skills, to quote Liam Neeson, although we're not killing anybody, unless we're killing the energy of the room sometimes. I'm guilty of that. But at the same time, we come to this with the ability to make our guests comfortable and make them shine. And that's worth something. And I think the paradigm we've gotten to is that we should feel grateful that somebody comes on my show. And I'm going to be very honest. As you all know, I like to talk. I do solo episodes all the time. And I can talk for half an hour straight without pausing for a breath and be good. So that means to me that if I want to do 6 months straight of me doing solo episodes on how you can become a better communicator or how you can tap into your mindful creativity, so be it. I can do that. We can all do that. The point is, we bring people on our shows because we want to highlight the really cool work that they're doing. So that's one of the things that I think we can educate PR pros on and our guests on, that we are giving them access to our audience, yes, but we're going to do it in a way that's really exciting and really wonderful for them. And we need to remind people that there's value in that. And we need to remind PR pros that there's value in that. So I do that in part by setting some clear expectations. I have this podcast guest interest form that you go nowhere. If you don't fill that out, you're not going to get on my show. Except for if you're Harrison Ford, yes, you can get on my show. I will lick your boots without any problem if you are Harrison Ford. If you are not Harrison Ford, you would need to be Jonathan Bailey. And then, yes, I would, or Matt Bomer or Meryl Streep. Yes, I will absolutely make sure that you do not have to fill anything out. You just come on and do your thing. Everybody else, really, honestly, and it's because the questions that I ask on there give me the opportunity to do really in-depth research based on what you say, because I want to be talking about what you want to be talking about deeply. That's the point of all this. So I set pretty clear expectations with the form, and I create a sort of a guidelines thing, and people see it, they fill it out. And I'm also really crystal clear with the PR pros on the kinds of guests that I'm looking for, because if it's a really compelling guest, Okay. If it's someone they're really pushing, I want to know why they're pushing that person. And I would love to know that you know what my show's about. So I've started getting these. I really love that episode that you did with Reena Friedman Watts. He's fabulous. Okay, you did not listen to my show because you didn't, you just picked an episode and you sort of said something. I want to know that you're interested in this show and how it can really be a partner with you and what you're doing for your client. So you need to know that. You need to know my show. You need to know the format that I want things pitched in. If you're just sending me the entire press kit, I don't want to see it. And I will tell you that immediately. So I would like us to be collaborators. If you're a PR pro and you're pitching, I want to invite you into my creative process so that we can serve each other's needs. And that might mean that we take a 5-minute call and we talk about things. That might mean that we sort of share the demographics, that notion of what's your mailing list and promising and also delivering on sharing the episode. One of the things that I do is I create, and I know Kurt does this too, he creates a very customized, shareable Instagram post, an Instagram story. And I've seen Reena's version as well. Podcasters that are in it to win it, if you will, we tend to do that. I go so far as to create in their brand colors. I ask for the hex desk of their brand colors and I create the Instagram story, Instagram posts, TikToks, whatever in their brand colors to make it easier for them to share because I want it to be frictionless, right? That's important to me because that makes it easier for them to share the episode because I think one of the things that we get away from is that the guest often is telling the same story over and over and over again. So they don't want to keep sharing the same story over and over again. And one of the things I love about the three of you is that you all look for deeper stories. So you're looking for things that this guest may not have shared before. And that's one of the things that we can offer to the PR pros as a way of deepening their understanding of just how good you are. And there's something that's really interesting to me about it. And I love what you said, Kurt, about the tiers. There's a basic, there's elevated possibility, and then there's a full partnership, and you can charge for that. We are not supposed to just do this for free, I don't think, because it's something we are investing a lot of energy and a lot of time in. So I really appreciate that you said that. And one last thing before I hush up, because I know I love to talk, it's not pay to play, right? I'm not telling somebody you get on my show only if you pay. Mm-hmm. That's not what's going on. I don't think anybody's saying that, but I wanted to make it very clear that you don't have to pay for the basic. If you want to come in and do the interview and you want to sponsor, I would love that. But it's not the gatekeeper for being on the show because there are some people who are just starting out and they need a break. And I'm certainly willing to do that. So having that kind of opportunity for people is important. And then last but not least, and then I'll shut up and you can talk, Kurt, you want to nurture these long-term relationships with all of the PR pros because they're not transactional. They're built over time, but they are reciprocal. And that is me for that. Kurt, you wanted to say something about 25 minutes ago.
Oh, no. One of the major things I think, just kind of build up on that, especially when it comes to communication with PR people. One guy, Eric, this PR guy that has gotten me at least 3 guests that I know of he got me Biff Nakey, he got me this associate conductor, Heidi Jostin, and then another guest earlier on. Like, we've gotten to the point where he'll say, hey, Kurt, I got this guest, they're doing a show in London or they're doing a show in Kitchener or Toronto or whatever. If you got a chance, you want to come on up and do an interview live, or, we can do a Zoom call, whatever. It's like, it's gotten to that stage, at least with this one particular PR person, which is great because it's like, I can either say, well, no, I'm feeling introverted, so I'm not going to go, or I'd love to have a Zoom call instead. So it comes down to how do we want to actively interact with these people. And I love Reena's, what's the guest daddy story? I think that's classic. That's just on brand for you, Reena. I love that. That's great. But it just comes back to also, how invested are we going to have to be in the guests? And I know we've all talked about guests not sharing our shows and everything like that. Even if they check yes on that guest interest form, it still doesn't mean they're actively going to do it. And that's kind of the kicker for everything when it comes to all the time and effort and editing and graphic design, all this other work that we put into it, that people just think it's a press record and go. So
Right. Well, and it's like it's like we were saying too, is like some of the I love helping out brand new authors or brand new artists. I mean, I love having that because there's a point, but I just say it's not like they have the money to spend on it, but what they do is they do have the time. Time is the most valuable resource that anybody has. And the fact that like I've said this to them is I've said this to them. I said, listen, your job is to first of all subscribe to my channel, download my episodes, and your job also is to share the heck out of that based off of the same amount of time I put into making this. So especially as the fact that I told them, it says I'm going to be deliberate and make this a evergreen interview. So that way, when I'm going to check back in with you, and when I've had you come back on again, and I've had a lot of guests like, can I come back on? I'm like, absolutely. Just check in your, and what I'll do is like, listen, I talked to my marketing person. They said that the previous views, the previous downloads of your other episode was too low. So if you can actually pump that up a bit for us, I think it'd probably be really good. And you gotta, and then you'll be able to do that. So making sure, as you say, there is, I wouldn't say transactional, but there is a relationship that's going to happen. Is that I'm going to do this for you, and I'm going to do you proud. I'm going to make sure that that conversation sounds really good, because I really enjoy talking to you. But you need to make sure that keep in mind that this is a tool in your toolbox that I've given you to make sure that you can reach more of your community. The community that you've created, that I helped you create by giving you this tool. I just need you to also make sure that you let people know that I talk to you. So
I love that for sure. Reena, did you have something to say?
First of all, I absolutely think that that is gold. I think that's a really good approach. And tagging on to that, I have reached back out to people who didn't share or didn't make themselves like a collaborator on a reel on IG, on Instagram. And I'll say, hey, I really think that this was an amazing reel that your audience would appreciate. I think it's worth sharing. And there is a feature, and I'll break it down to them like they might not know how to use the feature. I'll say there's a feature on there where if I make you a collaborator, it's a really easy way for you to share it. You just accept that, and I will like screenshot where it shows, inviting you to be a collaborator. Yeah, like that they didn't understand it. You know what I mean? And then I've gotten a lot more people to accept it. Or I'll say, hey, this collaboration feature wasn't available when I did this a long time ago. Now it is. And hey, Flashback Friday or Throwback Thursday, find a reason to reshare it. Here's how you can do it.
I've had a couple that it's rare, but I've had a couple who've overshared the interview, and I'm like, and I respond like, do you want to be on other podcasts? Because I know other podcasters that you could, thank you, but I have a couple that just like, listen, like they redo the reel and do something else on this. I'm like, you can be on other podcasts, it's not just me out there.
Well, but at the same time, that's lovely because that means that they had such a wonderful experience and got enough out of it to want to keep talking about that. And I think as podcasters, and I don't want to speak for the three of you, but I love it when a guest comes back to me and says, that was really amazing. I feel like I got so much out of being on your show, not just the reach, but in my own self. And I had a guest from February just share a reel of her interview. She's the CEO of a really cool company. She just shared it today. And it was out of the blue. She tagged me, and of course I reshared, blah, blah, blah. But what was interesting to me about it is that I hadn't expected it. And she said this was she just messaged me and she said, this was such a powerful moment for me because it made my company go into a different direction. And I didn't even know that it could before our talk. And I went, ah, that's so cool. So to me, again, we're not just providing a conversation. I think sometimes we change lives. We certainly change trajectories. And I think that's something that's really important for us to remember. We're developing and maintaining a very intimate relationship for that 45 minutes to an hour because we do go so in depth and we talk about these things with these people who, because we create a safe space, we're allowing them the opportunity to really go inside themselves and come out with their truth. And that is incredibly important. And I have so much more else to say about PR relationships because I did this deep dive into what I thought, and I won't say it because maybe I'll do a solo podcast episode about it because there's something important about us remembering that we are a very important part of a very important conversation. And we have reach and we have influence and we also have, again, truth and the confidence to be out there with it. So I'm very grateful to all of you for being here and to talking about these really important questions that we who are communicating on this wavelength as far as podcasting goes that are so important. So thank you all for allowing me to be the host, Kurt and Reena especially, for brainchilding this thing. And I'm really grateful to all of you.
It was a blast, as always. I mean, this was way faster than what we did the first time. So nothing against everyone else, but it's a lot easier with 4 people than 8.
Mm.
Yeah, that was very powerful. Yeah. And I'm going to share the biscuits out of it, like Barney said.
Tag us all for that collaboration. You can have up to 5 people.
There you go.
It's my bad language. Yeah, I can't. I forgot how to swear now that I have like 3 kids.
No, I think that's fabulous. I think, well, I will tell you all. So a couple of years ago, I decided that I wanted to be able to swear with impunity and without prejudice like crazy. So I made up my own swear words. I made up the words flirt, dropple, and mugby. And I made a huge infographic that describes the words, that explains what they are, and whether or not they're adjective or whether or not they can be used as an adjective or a noun or whatever, and got them into Urban Dictionary. And what's really fun is that sometimes walking on the streets of New York, I'll hear, oh, you're such a flirt. And it blew me away the first time that happened because they are now in the popular vernacular out there breeding and becoming more ubiquitous because people don't know what it is, right? I know it's invective. I know it's an insult, but it's, you flirt. Oh, I can't believe you're such a dropple. And these words did not exist before, I think, March 3rd, 2021 or something like that. They don't exist. So they can mean anything you want them to mean. No one can censor them. And it's fabulous.
So Izolda, you got to help me out. Okay, I had a friend of mine who started an exclamation. So maybe you can help me out. It's called Sweet Lincoln's Mullet as like an exclamation. So see if you can help that get going.
Get growing. Sure. Sweet Lincoln's Mullet. I love it.
I prefer idols. I've been using that for decades. So it's a cross between an idiot and an adult. So it works out.
To me, that's a very beautiful thing is you can take the algorithm out of the social media, but you can't take the social media out of the algorithm. And we can come up with our own words. The languages grow. So why not put our own little stamp on it? So Sweet Lincoln's Mullet, I'm going to start using that on the podcast and see if I can, and it's the same. I write books. And what's really fabulous is this is a couple months ago, I was sitting at a coffee shop here in Manhattan somewhere, and I look over and there's someone reading one of my books. And first of all, I plotzed. Second of all, I totally hounded her. I'm like, hi, I wrote that book. Can I sign it for you? What? You're reading Die by the Sword. That's the first book in my mystery series. Can I sign it? I wrote that. She had to see my license before she'd believe me that I wrote. So I had to show her my driver's license, which made me glad I didn't write it under a pen name.
Awesome. Mm.
So I am again grateful and thank you all so much for participating in this. Thank you, Kurt, for letting me host and for being the person who actually puts this on. Until next time, when Pod Talk returns, I am Izolda Trakhtenberg for Barney Smith, Reena Friedman Watts, and Kurt Sasso saying thank you so much for being here, and we'll see you next time.
That was so good.